Hey everybody, welcome to this Caregiver Coffee. My name is Matthew Estrad. I'm a gerontologist in St. Tammany Parish, and I've been partnering with the Council on Aging in St. Tammany, or COAST, for over 10 years. All of that time as a caregiver support group facilitator, and half of that time in bringing you videos like this called Caregiver Coffee. Today, today I am bringing you another installment of a dementia, and today we'll be talking about FTD, or frontal temporal dementia. Before we get into that, just want to talk a little bit about our caregiver support group that I do in every video, just in case this is the one video that you watch. So we meet every Tuesday of the year, basically, unless there's a holiday. We meet from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. Central, and we're either in person or we're on the virtual platform Zoom. The basic pattern is this throughout the month. The first Tuesday, we are at the Slidell Senior Activity Center on Cousin Street. And then on the second Tuesday of the month, that's our first virtual one of the month, we use Zoom. So you can either use your computer, you can use your tablet, your smart tablet, you can use your smartphone, or you can use a landline phone and just dial in that way, like an old-fashioned conference call. On the third Tuesday of the month, we are using we are at the Covington Senior Activity Center off of 190 in Covington. And on the fourth Tuesday of the month, we are back on Zoom. And if there happens to be a fifth Tuesday of the month, sometimes we meet, sometimes we don't, and we let you know on our schedule, which is why it's important for you to keep up with the latest updates of our caregiver support group. If you go to coastseniors.org and you go to caregiver services, and you have a few clicks, and then you'll see my picture. And then what you'll want to do there is download the flyer. Now, every 2 months, we refresh the flyer and we put new dates for the latest 2 months. It'll tell you exactly where we are and what date. And if there's a particular holiday that falls on a Tuesday, it tells you when we move that particular support group, because we really try not to cancel, but rather postpone. We either move it up or we move it back in that week. So also, if you have that flyer, you can scan the QR or click on the link, and you can go ahead and join our private email list. And all this is an email that I send out once a week, typically on Tuesday morning, as a reminder of where we are. And when a new 2-month calendar/flyer comes out, I end up putting it on that list also. So if you want to keep up, even if you're not coming every week or every month or anything like that, at least we'll keep you in the know. We have a little over 100 people that are on the email list, and we certainly don't have that many people showing up. So some people just want to know what's going on and join us when they can. So I encourage you to go ahead and do that. And you can always contact me too if you have any questions about what the caregiver support group does, what sort of things we talk about. Feel free to reach out to me. And if you can't make Tuesdays ever at that time, let me know that also, and I can help you find a support group in our area, either in person or virtual, just because I know a lot of the facilitators and I work at a hospital, so I may be able to help you in that area. All right, with that information concluded, we're going to get into this information about frontotemporal degeneration or frontotemporal dementia. You could say either or. So all this information is from the AFTD.org, the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration. And we're going to hit the basics. There's so much information on this website, just like the dementia site, Lewy Body Dementia Association. There's a lot of information at the Association for Frontotemporal Degeneration. And if you have seen one of the first dementia videos that are on this playlist, you know that dementia is a broad umbrella term. And under that are specific diseases that cause some or all of these symptoms that make up dementia. Now, we call that an umbrella term, dementia, but then you also can have umbrella terms down here. So we talked about in a previous video, Lewy body dementia is an umbrella term because you can have two types. And FTD is the same way. You can consider that an umbrella too, because there's different things, different diseases or manifestations of FTD that we'll talk about. There's a behavioral variant FTD, primary progressive aphasia. There's FTD dash ALS. There's cortical basal syndrome, and there's progressive supranuclear palsy. So we'll talk about each of those very briefly and then conclude the video. So, and I'm going to leave this, we'll leave the link to this website there for you. All right. Just looking at my timer. All right, so first we'll start with the behavioral variant FTD. First of all, sorry, it's important to know that FTD is the most common form of dementia for people who are under 60 years old, and it's often misdiagnosed because many times the medical team sees someone who is 60 years old and they think, well, they can't possibly have Alzheimer's disease. I'm sorry, they say that they do have Alzheimer's disease, but it just gets misdiagnosed as to different things because of the many symptoms and because the person is younger. So pardon my confusion with that. All right, so behavioral variant FTD. It's the most common form of FTD. It's responsible for about half of the cases, and it's also frequently referred to as frontotemporal dementia or Pick's disease. The hallmarks of BV FTD, as it's abbreviated, are personality changes, apathy, and progressive decline in socially appropriate behavior, judgment, self-control, and empathy. Unlike Alzheimer's disease, memory is usually relatively spared in this form of FTD. People with this form do not recognize changes in their own behavior, and they exhibit awareness or concern on the effect that their behavior might be having on people who are around them. So with that, let's get to this list of symptoms. When we know the signs, we know the symptoms, we can recognize it in others and possibly help get a diagnosis. So the first one is disinhibition, a loss or lack of restraint based on social norms, leading to inappropriate behavior or impulsivity. This might manifest itself in making uncharacteristically rude or offensive comments, whereas this person, someone who normally would not ever do that, ignoring other people's personal space, shoplifting, reckless spending, touching strangers, or inappropriate sexual behavior, or aggressive outbursts. So that's disinhibition. Next is apathy, indifference or lack of interest in previously meaningful activities. And these behaviors may include loss of interest in work, hobby, or personal relationships, neglect of personal hygiene, loss of initiative. Next is emotional blunting, a loss of warmth, empathy, or concern for others. These behaviors may include indifference to important events, such as the death of a loved one or a friend, a failure to recognize that a loved one is angry, upset, or unhappy. And then there are compulsive or ritualistic behaviors, single behaviors or routines that are performed over and over, which may include repeating words or phrases, hand rubbing or clapping, rereading the same book over and over again, hoarding, or walking to the same place at the same time every day. You might see changes in eating habit or diet. This can include binge eating, carbohydrate craving, eating only specific foods, increase or first-time use of tobacco products, hyperorality, putting things in their mouth, excessive water or alcohol consumption, or attempting to consume inedible objects. Then there's deficits in executive function. Now, executive function is decision-making, judgment, problem-solving, and organizational skills. So deficits in executive function could be difficulty in planning the day's activities, questionable financial decisions, and on-the-job mistakes that may be uncharacteristic for that person. Other symptoms include agitation, emotional instability, that may be conveyed by pacing, or frequent or abrupt mood changes. And then there's lack of insight. As noted above, the failure to recognize changes in behavior or exhibit awareness of the effects of their behavior on others. And this behavior may include blaming others for the consequences of socially unacceptable behavior, such as a job loss, so blaming others after that, or anger at their limitations on activities. And then what someone could do is there's the case for the AFTD has this for every one of these different variants of FTD, and that's a checklist that you can download that has all of these. We won't go through all of them, of course, but it is there. Just know it's there. We will talk more about this. We'll keep talking about the behavioral variant since over 50% of the cases are BVFTD. Diagnosing is challenging, especially in the early stages, whereas commonly misdiagnosed, for example, as depression or other psychiatric disorders, Alzheimer's disease, vascular dementia, Parkinson's, or even alcohol or drug dependence. If you have a concern about a loved one being misdiagnosed with another condition, or if you have a concern about the symptoms or signs, it's very important to consult the doctor. And I would say mention the fact that it could be behavioral variant FTD if that's not what they're thinking that it is. The rate of progression of symptoms can vary, but eventually the behavioral and cognitive symptoms will become more pronounced. A significant impairment in activities of daily living, that's eating, feeding oneself, dressing oneself, bathing oneself, grooming, being able to walk. So a lot of things that we take for granted that are essential. So the activities daily living may require extra support, such as residency in a full-time care facility outside the home when it progresses enough. As with all forms of FTD, there are no treatments for behavioral variant FTD, and in most cases, its progression cannot be slowed. So that's like with all dementias, as we've mentioned. The behavioral and environmental interventions are currently considered to be the most effective way to manage the symptoms, and challenging disruptive behavioral expressions can cause more agitation, while reassuring and distracting tactics can be considered more helpful. All right, and it goes on, which I'm not going to go into, but it goes into genetics. Is it inherited? And at least I'll mention this, in at least half of the affected individuals, the answer is no. It's meant to be sporadic. There's also pathology, and there's more information. There's even a YouTube video with a particular doctor, researcher who can tell you more about that. So that's behavioral variant FTD. Then there's primary progressive aphasia. This is the type of dementia that Bruce Willis has. You may have seen that in the last couple of years. I think it was 2 years, feels like 2 years ago. They announced that he had that. He's retiring from acting. He has primary progressive aphasia, also known as PPA. It is diagnosed when 3 criteria are met: when there's a gradual impairment of language and not just speech, the language problem is initially the only impairment, and the underlying cause is a neurodegenerative disease. Experts further subdivide PPA into 3 clinical subtypes based on the specific language skills that are most affected. And I'll name them, but I'm not going to go into that much detail. And I'm not going to go into detail for that, but there are links to click. Non-fluent agrammatic variant, semantic variant, and logopenic variant. And there is a PPA diagnostic checklist, as they did have for the behavioral variant. Okay, let's go to FTD/ALS. And many who are watching this might be familiar with ALS, which stands for amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, ALS, or Lou Gehrig's disease. So these can be coupled. In 2011, researchers identified a certain variant that is the cause of both the genetic FTD and the genetic ALS. Previously, ALS was thought to be purely a movement disorder, while FTD was purely cognitive and a behavioral form of dementia. Now, FTD and ALS can occur in the same person in a clinical subtype known as FTD-ALS. Describing this unique clinical syndrome has been an area of active research, and they're still learning more. For a person who has FTD-ALS, symptoms are one of the FTD disorders, typically the behavioral variant, and are often first to appear, and they can include changes in behavior, personality, and language. Motor symptom skills that are often more typically associated with ALS, including difficulty walking, swallowing, and/or using one's hands, develop later. The former symptoms are caused by degeneration of the brain's frontal and temporal lobes, which are frontal is here, and temporal is here, temple. While the latter are the result of deterioration of the nerves in the spinal cord that communicate the muscles in the rest of the body. And there is a checklist as with the other FTD variants. Then we'll go to cortical basal syndrome. And it looks like this one's opening up just to a PDF. All right, CBS, as it's also known, belongs to a category of FTD disorders that primarily affect movement. Some symptoms are of both CBS and PSP, which is progressive supranuclear palsy, which is the next one we'll talk about. Another FTD associated with decline in motor function resemble those often seen in people with Parkinson's disease. So you can see how this is very complex. Parkinson's disease, we talked about being related to Lewy body dementia and possibly in many cases having those Parkinsonian symptoms in Lewy body dementia. So here are some of the symptoms for CBS, the cortical basal syndrome. There's limb apraxia, the inability to compel a hand, arm, or leg to carry out a desired motion, although the muscle strength needed for to complete the action is maintained. Difficulty completing familiar purposeful activities such as opening a door, operating a television remote, or even using kitchen tools, and tripping or falling. There's akinesia or bradykinesia, and this is abnormally slow movement. Rigidity, which we also see in Parkinson's, we talked about before. Dystonia, the uncontrollable muscle contraction that causes an arm or leg to twist involuntarily or to assume an abnormal position. And then there can be these cognitive symptoms, which we've not talked about before in any of the other dementia types. Alien limb phenomenon, a sensation that the arm or leg is not part of the body, accompanied by inability to control the movement of the limb. Acalculia, the inability to carry out simple mathematical calculations such as adding or subtracting, and visual spatial deficits that include difficulty orienting in space. So like depth perception is one of the big things there. And then we're going to jump to the last one, PSP, or progressive supranuclear palsy. The earliest motor symptoms may be stiffness in the axial muscles, such as the neck and the trunk, along with poor balance and more frequent falls. The earliest visual signs are decreased in upward vertical movement of the eyes and a progressive inability to move the eyes, including opening and closing the eyes. PSP can also affect coordination and movement of the mouth, tongue, and throat. In addition, motor symptoms, people with PSP may exhibit changes in behavior and language skills common with the behavioral variant of FTD and PPA, this particularly as the disease progresses. All right. So yeah, so these I think we've covered about everything on here. And there is lots of information for you if you are interested in learning more about all these different forms of frontal temporal degeneration. Again, all of this stuff is brought to you by theaftd.org. That's the Association for Frontal Temporal Degeneration, and I will have a link in the description of this video. So thank you for hanging on with me for this longer than usual video. These are all just very detailed and complex diseases related to the frontal and temporal parts of the brain, and important that we know about this stuff so that it can be diagnosed, because as mentioned before, these are often misdiagnosed to be other things. So I hope this was helpful for you. Please share if you enjoyed this video, share it with others. And certainly if you see these signs, share it with others, and make sure that you're having good conversations and communication with your doctor, because you may be the one to tell the doctor and say, hey, what if what if it's one of these variants of FTD, or you help a friend out with that so that they're not misdiagnosed any longer. So again, thank you for joining me for this Caregiver Coffee, and I hope to be on your smartphone and computer for many of these Caregiver Coffees to come. Thank you again, and take care.